The morgue horror stories you're about to hear will prove that the dead don't always rest in peace. Bodies vanishing without explanation, impossible manifestations, and presences that defy all logic. These are just the beginning of what happens when the line between the world of the living and the dead blurs. Take, for instance, the story you're about to hear, where a pathology assistant finds out that the young Jane Doe brought to the morgue that night wasn't as unknown as she seemed, and that certain marks on a body can hide a truth far more terrifying than it appears. But before we start, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any chilling stories. I've worked at the morgue of St. Mary's Hospital in Minnesota for nearly 10 years. I've seen it all. Bodies arriving in pieces, others that seemed to be sleeping, and even some that, well, left an impression I'd rather forget. But nothing, absolutely nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was around 11 p.m., and I was finishing up some reports when they brought her in. A young woman, maybe 25 years old, with dark brown hair and pale skin. She had no ID, so we called her Jane Doe. She was found in a park lying in the snow. The preliminary cause of death, hypothermia. Except, when I looked at the body, something was off. First, there were the marks. She had these spiral patterns on her arms, as if someone had carefully traced them onto her skin. They were deep, almost like scars, but they seemed fresh. And her skin, it had a strange, opalescent glow, as if it was reflecting a light that didn't exist. I had never seen anything like it. As I approached to examine her, I felt the air grow colder. The temperature in the room is always low, of course, but this was different. It was as if the cold was coming from her. I looked at the thermometer on the wall and saw the numbers dropping. 50 degrees, 40, 30, and it kept falling. My breath formed clouds of vapor in the air, and I could feel the frost forming on my fingertips. That's when the lights started to flicker. A low hum, almost imperceptible, began to resonate through the room. It was as if the sound was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I looked at Jane Doe's body and my stomach knotted. Her skin seemed to glow even more, and those spirals on her arms, they seemed to be moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but they were moving. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, you know. Working in a morgue can play tricks on anyone's mind. But then the lights flickered again, and the hum grew louder. The temperature dropped so low that I could see my breath freezing in the air. And that's when I realized Jane Doe wasn't dead. At least, not in the way we understand it. She opened her eyes. I froze in place. Not from the cold, but from pure terror. Her eyes were open, yes, but they weren't normal eyes. They glowed like stars, an intense and icy white, and they seemed to see me. Not like an empty corpse, but like something conscious, something that knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. The spiral marks on her arms began to move. I wasn't imagining it. They rippled as if they were made of liquid mercury, glowing with their own light, pulsing in rhythm with the hum that now resonated through the room. I tried to step back, but my legs felt rooted to the floor, as if the cold had anchored me there. My phone, which was in the pocket of my lab coat, started vibrating frantically. I pulled it out, desperate for some form of help, but the screen was dead. Nothing. Just darkness. And yet, it kept vibrating, as if something was trying to communicate through it. I threw the phone away, but the hum only grew louder, now mixed with a high-pitched sound, almost like a distant scream. The lights above me started to flicker frantically, then, pop, they exploded one by one. Shards of glass fell around me, and the room was plunged into near-total darkness, lit only by the opalescent glow of Jane Doe's skin. The temperature dropped to levels I didn't even know were possible. Frost began to form on the walls, the floor, even on my lab coat. My hands were numb and I could feel the cold burning my lungs with every breath. And then she moved. It wasn't a normal movement, like someone sitting up or standing. It was fluid, as if her body was transforming into something that defied all the laws of physics. Her skin began to glow even brighter, and I could see the frost forming around her, creating complex patterns, like crystals growing in fast forward. The spirals on her arms now covered her entire body, swirling and twisting like snakes of light. She stood up, but it was no longer a person. It was something made of light and ice, a creature that seemed to step out of a nightmare. Her eyes still fixed on me, and I could feel something, a presence invading my mind. It wasn't words, but a sensation, as if she was telling me, "You shouldn't be here." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. All I could do was watch as the creature that had been Jane Doe stood up, glowing like a fallen star, and the cold consumed everything around me. I don't know how, but I managed to break free from that paralysis. My legs suddenly responded and I ran. I didn't think, I just ran. The morgue has an underground tunnel that leads to the main hospital, and I rushed through it as if the devil himself was on my heels. And in a way, he was. As I ran through the tunnel, I heard something that chilled me even more. A song. It was soft, almost sweet, like a lullaby. But there was something about it that was wrong. The melody was distorted, as if it was being sung by something that wasn't human, and it was coming from behind me, echoing off the tunnel walls, growing louder and closer. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew she was there, following me, that creature of light and ice that had been Jane Doe. My feet pounded the concrete floor and my breath was ragged, but I didn't stop. The song continued, now mixed with that infernal hum, and I could feel the cold catching up to me, as if it was trying to pull me back. When I finally reached the hospital, I nearly collided with a security guard. He grabbed me by the shoulders, alarmed by my appearance. I must have been pale, sweating, and shaking as if I'd seen a ghost. And, in a way, I had. "The morgue," I stammered, pointing toward the tunnel. "There's something down there, something evil." The guard called for backup, and soon we were back at the morgue. But there was nothing. Nothing but ice. The entire place was frozen, as if someone had cranked up a walk-in freezer to the max. The walls, the floor, even the instruments were covered in a thick layer of ice. And Jane Doe's body? Gone. All that remained was the table where she had been, now split in two, as if something had exploded from within. The official explanation was that there had been a malfunction in the refrigeration system, an accident. They even found a technician to sign off on the report, but I knew it was a lie. I had seen it. I had felt it. And doing some research later, I discovered something that disturbed me even more. Similar disappearances had occurred over the years, always during heavy snowstorms. Bodies vanishing, morgues freezing for no reason, and stories of a strange light seen in the snow. No one had ever connected the dots, but I knew. Something was out there, something that came with the cold. I never worked the night shift again. In fact, I can barely stand to be alone in the dark now. Sometimes when it's very cold, I still hear that distorted lullaby echoing in my mind. And every time it snows, I look at the spirals the snow forms on the ground and wonder, is she there, waiting? Or has she already found another place to call home? One thing is for sure, there are things in this world we shouldn't see. And I saw one. What a horror. What did you think of the story? What rating out of 10 would you give it? Leave your thoughts here in the comments. Discovering that a body can hide dark secrets is frightening. But sometimes the real terror comes when the dead don't stay quiet. Like in the story you're about to see, where a wake turns into a living nightmare. My name is Helen. I've been working in a morgue for over 10 years, and I've seen it all in this life. Or rather, in this death. My job is to take care of the bodies, to prepare them for the final goodbye. I embalm, I arrange, I do everything necessary so that families have one last moment of peace with their loved ones. But listen, after what happened with Ethan, I could never look at this place the same way again. The morgue, which was once a place of respect and silence, now seems to carry a heavy energy, as if the walls absorb the dark secrets that unfold here. Ethan was the new caretaker. He came to replace old John, who retired after 30 years of taking care of this place. John was quiet, you know, a calm man who knew how to respect the silence of death. He had an almost comforting presence, as if his experience brought some kind of order to the chaos that death can represent. But Ethan was different. From the very first day, there was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just the way he walked, a bit dragging, as if he was always hiding something. Nor was it the way he looked at the bodies, with a strange gleam in his eyes, as if he saw something beyond the lifeless flesh. It was something deeper, something that gave me the creeps, and made the air heavier when he was around. I tried to ignore it. After all, everyone has their quirks, right? But then there was that incident with the young woman. She came here after a car accident. She was only 24 years old. I did the embalming, took care of everything correctly, as I always do. Her body was intact despite the accident injuries. I remember thinking how unfair death is, taking such a young life. But the next day, when her family came to see her, her sister started screaming. Where are her fingers? What did they do to her fingers? I didn't understand. I rushed to see, and it was true. 2 fingers from her right hand were missing, cut clean off as if they had never been there. My blood ran cold. I knew I had done everything correctly, so how the hell could this have happened? The room seemed to spin around me as I tried to comprehend what I was seeing. The family was in a panic, of course. There were tears, screams, accusations. And in the middle of the confusion, I saw Ethan. He was there, in a corner, watching everything with a small smile, almost imperceptible. That smile sent chills down my spine. It was as if he was enjoying the chaos, as if he knew something that no one else did. Now, we're in the middle of a legal battle. The family is suing the morgue, and I'm here trying to understand what happened. But one thing is for sure. Ethan is not what he seems to be, and I'm afraid of what he might still do. The morgue, which was once a place of respectful goodbyes, now feels like a labyrinth of secrets and dangers. Every noise echoes louder. Every shadow seems to move when I'm not looking. And Ethan, he's always there, always watching, always smiling. After the incident with the young woman, the funeral home owner, Mr. Almeida, decided to take action. He installed hidden cameras in the embalming room. He said it was to ensure the safety and integrity of the place. But we all knew it was because of Ethan. No one said anything directly to him, but the atmosphere at the morgue had changed. Everyone was suspicious. Everyone was watching. And Ethan? He continued to act in that strange way, as if nothing had happened. He even seemed more confident, as if he was daring everyone to find out what he was hiding. Weeks went by, and I started to think that maybe we had overreacted. Until one evening, Mr. Almeida called me into his office. He was pale, his hands shaking. "Helen, you need to see this," he said, turning on the computer. It was a video from the hidden cameras. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just Ethan doing his job. But then he stopped. He looked around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. And that's when he did something that made me want to vomit. He took the hand of an elderly man who had passed away that week, a kind gentleman whom I had prepared myself. I remember how peaceful he looked, as if he were simply sleeping. But Ethan, he didn't see the peace. He saw something else. With horrible precision, he cut off 2 fingers from the corpse. The knife glinted under the cold light of the room, and the sound of metal slicing through dead flesh echoed like a sharp snap. And then, he put them in his mouth. He started chewing. I could barely believe what I was seeing. My stomach turned and I felt a chill run down my spine, as if an invisible hand was pulling me into this nightmare. Ethan chewed slowly, as if savoring every bite. It was disgusting, but at the same time he seemed satisfied. His eyes closed for a moment as if he was experiencing something beyond our comprehension. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat, and I had to hold onto the table to keep from fainting. Mr. Almeida immediately called the police. When the officers saw the video, they were shocked. One of them even left the room, visibly nauseous. They searched Ethan's locker and found a hidden box. Inside, there was a collection of pieces, fingers, bits of ears, even a piece of a tongue, all carefully wrapped like trophies. There were even labels with dates and names, as if he was cataloging his conquests. That's when I realized Ethan wasn't just a disturbed caretaker. He had a compulsion, something that went far beyond what we could imagine. The police began a deep investigation and discovered that this wasn't the first time. In other morgues where Ethan had worked, bodies had been found mutilated. Always small parts, things that could go unnoticed. A finger here, a bit of an ear there. Things that families didn't always notice, especially in cases of severe accidents. But now, with the video and the evidence, there was no way to deny it. Ethan was a predator, someone who literally fed on death. He was arrested, of course, but even today when I enter that embalming room, I feel a chill down my neck. The air seems heavier, as if the place itself is imbued with what he did. And this question never leaves me. How many others like him are out there hiding in the shadows, waiting for the chance to satisfy their darkest desires? Ethan was arrested, but the sense of relief I hoped for never comes. During the trial, we discovered that he had worked in at least 3 other funeral homes before coming to us. In each of them, bodies had been found mutilated, but no one had ever suspected Ethan. He was careful, methodical. He knew how to blend in, how to appear as just a quiet, dedicated employee, until his compulsion took over and he couldn't resist anymore. He evaded suspicion for years, but here, in our morgue, he finally made a mistake. Now he's behind bars, but the rumors don't stop. Some say he managed to make a deal, that he could get out in a few years for good behavior. Others say he has contacts, that he could work in places like this again, as if nothing had happened. I don't know what's worse, the idea that he might come back, or the memory of that night when I saw the video. Even today, I close my eyes and see him chewing those fingers with an almost happy look. It's an image that never leaves my head, no matter how hard I try to forget it. What scares me the most, is that Ethan wasn't some supernatural monster. He wasn't a ghost, a demon, or something out of a horror movie. He was human, an ordinary man who walked among us, who seemed normal on the outside. But inside there was something broken, something that can't be explained. And it makes me think, how many other people carry that same evil, hidden behind a smile or a kind gesture? Sometimes when I'm alone in the embalming room, I look at the walls, the cameras that are still there, and I shiver. Because the evil that Ethan brought here wasn't something we could see coming. He didn't have horns or claws. He was like us. And that's the scariest part of it all. Evil sometimes looks just like us. And now, every time I prepare a body, I find myself checking the hands, the fingers, the ears. I check everything 2-3 times as if I could guarantee that nothing has been touched, that nothing has been taken. But deep down, I know Ethan wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. Scary, isn't it? We don't always know what we're dealing with until it's too late. And some people, by choice or by fate, end up crossing paths with forces that should have remained at peace. Like in the story you're about to hear, where an encounter with an occult leader revealed something that should never have been discovered. My name is Samuel, and I've been working in a morgue for 15 years. I've seen it all in this place, I swear. Bodies in conditions you can't even imagine, stories that would make the toughest of men lose sleep. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to what happened that night. It was a Friday the 13th, by the way. Coincidence? I don't think so. The day had started like any other. I arrived early, prepared the instruments, checked the cold rooms. Everything was normal, until around 10 in the morning, when a body was brought in that changed everything. It was a man, but not just any man. He was 120 years old. Yes, you heard right, 120 years old. And that wasn't all. He was the leader of an occultist cult. One of those groups that perform strange rituals and summon things that no one should touch. You get the picture, right? When the body arrived, it was accompanied by an escort. They were his 12 children, all dressed in black with a heavy energy that you could feel from meters away. They surrounded me, staring at me as if I were responsible for something. One of them, the eldest, approached me and said in a low voice, almost whispering, "Don't let anyone pray over the body, no one, Understood? I just nodded, not really understanding what was happening. But that warning echoed in my head. The body was placed in cold room number 13, of course, the farthest one, in the darkest corner of the morgue. And that's when things started to get strange. Around 3 p.m., I noticed that the cold room was heating up. I looked at the thermometer and almost fell over. The temperature was rising, even with the system working perfectly. I tried restarting it, checked the cables, but nothing worked. The cold room simply refused to cool down. And then the noises started. At first it was a low hum, almost imperceptible. I thought it was a faulty piece of equipment. But the sound became louder, more insistent, until suddenly it turned into a rhythmic beating. Boom, 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 like a heartbeat. And the worst part? The sound was coming from inside cold room number 13. I was paralyzed. My heart raced and I felt that cold down my spine that only appears when you know something is very, very wrong. I looked around, hoping to see someone, anyone, but the morgue was empty. Just me and that sound. Boom, boom, boom. And you think that was all? Oh, my friend, that was just the beginning. After that first night, things only got worse. The atmosphere in the morgue became heavy, as if the air was charged with something you couldn't see but could feel on your skin. My colleague, Carlos, was the first to crack. He was a tough guy, someone who had seen it all. But the next morning, he came in white as a sheet. "Samuel," he called me, his voice trembling. "I swear on everything that's holy. I saw that dead man's eyes open. They were glowing like he was staring at me, judging me." I tried to calm him down, to tell him it was just fatigue, that the mind plays tricks when you're exhausted. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. Carlos quit on the spot. He didn't even want to collect his things. He just said, "I won't set foot in here again," and left. And I couldn't blame him. In the days that followed, the equipment started to fail. The lights flickered, the freezers malfunctioned, and even the security system just stopped working. And there was a smell, a metallic smell, of old blood that permeated the air. We tried to clean, to air out, but nothing worked. It was as if the morgue was alive and it was warning us that something very serious was happening. And the nightmares? Oh, the nightmares. The whole team had them. They were so vivid, so real that you woke up in a sweat, unable to distinguish dream from reality. In mine, I saw the dead man, standing in the middle of the storage room. He spoke in a language I had never heard, but each word seemed to resonate in my head, as if he was trying to tell me something. I woke up with my heart pounding, and the worst part was that sometimes I swore I could still hear that voice whispering in my ear. 30 days had passed since the body arrived. 30 days of tension, fear, insomnia. And then, that night, what I feared most happened. We were finishing our shift when, suddenly, the lights went out. Everything became silent, that heavy silence that seems to swallow you. And then there was the scream. A terrifying scream that seemed to come from the storage room. It was loud, agonizing, as if someone was being tortured. My colleagues and I ran towards the sound, flashlights in hand, but no one wanted to get close to that cold room number 13. When we opened the door, the smell of blood was unbearable. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I shone it into the cold room. And that's when I saw it. The man's body was gone. The cold room was empty, the door open. My heart almost stopped when I heard a noise behind me. I turned the flashlight and there he was, the 120-year-old man standing with a mocking smile on his face. His eyes glowed like fires, and that metallic smell seemed to emanate from him, as if he was radiating pure terror. I couldn't move. No one could. He looked at me and I felt like he was searching my mind, exploring every thought, every memory. And then he spoke, in that same language from my nightmares. This time, I understood. He said, "You shouldn't have brought me here." After that night, the dead man's children appeared at the morgue as if they already knew what had happened. They didn't ask questions, didn't say much. They just said, "We're going to bury him, now." And that's what they did. They organized everything in a few hours, but with one condition. They didn't want a priest at the funeral. The problem was that someone, out of negligence or stubbornness, called a priest anyway. And that's when everything went wrong. The funeral was scheduled for late afternoon in an old cemetery, one of those full of twisted trees and headstones worn by time. The coffin was there, closed, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. That metallic smell was still in the air, and I felt that something was going to happen, and it did. In the middle of the ceremony, the priest started to pray. He hadn't even finished the first sentence when we heard a loud crack, as if something had broken inside the coffin. Everyone stopped looking around until, bam! The coffin lid flew into the air, and the dead man stood up. He was exactly as I had seen him that night in the morgue, with that mocking smile and glowing eyes. The priest froze, and before anyone could react, the dead man moved. It was quick, brutal. He grabbed the priest with superhuman strength, and the scream that came out of that man. I'll never forget it. It was chaos. People were running in all directions, screaming, tripping over headstones. I could only watch, paralyzed, as the dead man did. Something to the priest. Something I can't describe, but that left the priest's body unrecognizable. When it was over, the dead man simply fell back into the coffin, as if nothing had happened. His children rushed to close the lid and bury him there, with no further ceremony. But the nightmare wasn't over. Back at the morgue, the noises started again. This time, they were coming from the cold room where the priest had been placed. Boom, boom, boom. That same rhythmic beating sound, but now louder, more insistent. No one could take it. The whole team refused to work at night, and I couldn't blame them. I started avoiding the morgue after sunset myself. The priest was buried a few days later, in a discreet, almost secret funeral. And strangely, as soon as he was put in the ground, the noises stopped. The morgue became silent again, but that silence was never the same. It was a heavy silence, as if the place was waiting for something to happen again. Today, years later, I still work there, but I'm not the same. Sometimes when I'm alone, I feel that metallic smell in the air, or I hear a low hum that makes me stop and look over my shoulder. And I wonder, is he still there? Or did he never really leave? I've learned one thing from all this. Some things are better left alone. Some secrets aren't meant to be discovered, and some bodies shouldn't be disturbed. The 120-year-old man was one of them. And me? I just hope he never needs to remind me again. Creepy. Some seek the occult out of curiosity. Others become part of it against their will. But what happens when a person starts to change in a way that defies all logic? The following story shows what happens when someone realizes they are no longer who they were. But before continuing with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you like our stories. So don't forget to let YouTube know you appreciate this type of content, and don't miss any more horror stories. I've always believed that working with death is a way to understand life. My name is Dr. Gabriel Moore, and I'm a medical examiner working in an isolated hospital here in Buenos Aires. It's not a glamorous place, far from it. The hospital is almost in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by this damp mist that seems to cling to your skin. But this is where I do what I do best: uncover the secrets that the dead carry. I've always had one foot in science and the other in faith. I believe in God, but I also believe in cells, tissues, and the evidence the body gives us. It's a delicate balance, you know? Like I'm always walking on a tightrope, trying not to fall to one side or the other. So far, it's worked out well. But there's someone here who throws me off that balance, Mary Ann. She's a nurse, one of the best I've ever seen, but she has a fascination with death that makes me uncomfortable. It's not normal, you know? She spends hours in the morgue, almost in a trance, watching the bodies as if she's waiting for them to rise up and tell secrets. Sometimes I catch her murmuring things I don't understand, like she's talking to someone only she can see. One night, everything changed. It was one of those cold nights, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and doesn't leave. The hospital was quiet, only the hum of the machines breaking the silence. That's when they brought him in. A young priest, the victim of a car accident. The body was, well, I won't go into details, but it was clear he didn't stand a chance. Mary Ann was there, of course. As soon as the body arrived, she appeared as if she had been summoned. And the way she looked at him, it wasn't the look of a nurse. It was something deeper, darker. She approached the body, ran her hand over his face as if she was blessing him or invoking something. I didn't know. "Mary Ann, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just saying goodbye, Doctor. He deserves that, don't you think?" I didn't know what to say, but that night, as I worked on the priest's body, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. And worse. I didn't know if it was fear of Mary Ann, or of what she might have brought into the morgue. I tried to focus on the work, but Mary Ann's comments didn't stop. She stood there, next to me, watching every move I made with that piercing gaze that seemed to see beyond flesh and bone. "He was special, you know," she said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence of the morgue. "Chosen. His death wasn't an accident." I stopped what I was doing and looked at her, trying to understand where this was coming from. "Mary Ann, he was the victim of a car accident. There's nothing special about that." She shook her head as if I were a slow student who didn't understand the lesson. "You don't see it, Doctor? He carried something. Something that shouldn't have been released. And now it's here, with us." This conversation was making me uncomfortable. "Mary Ann, that doesn't make sense. You're talking like he brought some kind of curse or something." "Exactly," she replied without hesitation. "And he won't rest in peace until it's resolved." I felt a chill run down my spine. "That's enough, Mary Ann. This is just hysteria. Go outside, get some air. You need to rest." But she didn't move. Instead, her eyes gleamed with an intensity that made me step back. "You don't understand, Gabriel. It's here. It's in him." Before I could react, Mary Ann approached the priest's body and placed her hand on his chest. That's when things started to get strange. The air around us seemed to grow heavier, denser, as if the morgue itself was holding its breath. "Mary Ann, step back," I said, trying to stay calm, but my voice trembled. "This is going too far." She completely ignored my words. Her fingers clutched the fabric of the priest's shirt, and I saw something I still can't explain today. His body began to change. Marks appeared on his skin like burns, but they weren't ordinary burns. They were symbols, patterns that intertwined in a way that seemed alive. "What's happening?" I cried out, but Mary Ann didn't hear me, or didn't want to hear. She started laughing, a low, raspy sound that echoed off the cold walls of the morgue. And then something even worse happened. Her face changed. The skin seemed to stretch. Her eyes turned completely black, and her mouth opened in a smile that wasn't human. It was as if something had taken possession of her, something ancient and evil. "Mary Ann!" I shouted, but the voice that came out of her wasn't hers. "It's here, Gabriel," she whispered, and the voice was rough, guttural, as if it came from a place that shouldn't exist, "and it wants to talk to you." I backed away, stumbling over the steel counters, but there was nowhere to run. The priest's body began to move, slowly, as if it was trying to sit up. The marks on his skin glowed with a faint light, and I smelled something burning, something not of this world. "This isn't real," I murmured, but my own words felt empty. I knew it was real. I could feel it. Mary Ann, or whatever she had become, approached me, and I saw something in her eyes that made me freeze, a mix of triumph and despair. "It's coming, Gabriel, and you can't stop it." The voice coming from Mary Ann was a disturbing mix. Part of it was still hers, soft and familiar, but the other part, it was something I can't quite describe. It was as if multiple voices were speaking at once, whispering, shouting, laughing. It was a cacophony of sounds that seemed to come from a place very, very far away. "You can't escape, Gabriel," the entity said, and I felt each word resonate in my head, as if they were being carved directly into my brain. "It's here, and it wants you." I didn't think twice. I turned and ran. Yes, me, a medical examiner used to being around death every day. I ran like my life depended on it. And maybe it did. The morgue doors slammed behind me, and I didn't stop until I was outside, in that cold, damp mist that seemed to wrap around the hospital like a dirty blanket. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but my heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I looked back, expecting to see Marianne coming after me, but there was no one, just silence and darkness. The next day I returned to the hospital with a knot in my stomach. Marianne wasn't there. No one knew where she was. That's when I discovered something that disturbed me even more. While going through the morgue's records, I found logs of bodies that had been altered. Strange marks, symbols carved into the skin, things I had never noticed before. And they all had one thing in common. Marianne had been the last person to handle them. That's when it all made sense. Marianne wasn't just fascinated by death. She was playing with something much bigger, much more dangerous. And that entity that had taken her form, it wasn't of this world. It was something she had summoned, or worse, something that had taken hold of her. Since that night, I've never been the same. The morgue, which was once my workplace, now gives me chills just thinking about it. And Marianne, well, I never saw her again. But sometimes on the quietest nights, when the wind blows in a strange way, I swear I can hear her voice whispering my name. The memory of that night serves as a frightening reminder that there are forces we can't see, but they are there, waiting, and some of them should not be disturbed. What a strange story. Being possessed by something evil is already a terrible fate, but what if the threat isn't within you, but beside you, disguised as something ordinary? Like in the story you're about to hear, where a vengeful spirit found a cruel way to continue its work. I grew up in a small town in the heart of Pennsylvania, the kind you only find if you're truly lost. My dad was the local morgue manager, and we lived in an old house right next to the building where he worked. From a young age, I got used to the idea that death was part of the routine. Dad often talked about the bodies he prepared, but there was one he never forgot. A serial killer who had terrorized the region years before I was born. According to my dad, this guy was responsible for some of the most brutal murders he had ever seen. Clean cuts, organs removed with precision, things that even I as a kid couldn't really understand. But what struck me the most was the way my dad talked about it, as if it had left a mark not only on the victims, but on everyone who had been involved in the case. One evening, my friend Stephen and I were at home, playing video games in my room, when we heard a noise coming from the hallway. It was a strange sound, like someone dragging their feet. We looked at each other, not sure what to do, until Stephen decided to take a peek. He opened the door slowly, and that's when we saw him. At the end of the hallway, standing still in the dim light, was a boy. He was pale, almost translucent, with dark, hollow eyes. He didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at us. I felt a chill run down my spine, as if the air had suddenly turned cold. Stephen quickly closed the door, and we stood there, not knowing what to do. When I told my parents about it, they just laughed. "Kid's imagination," my dad said, while my mom tried to reassure me, saying it was just fatigue. But I knew what I had seen, and so did Stephen. We couldn't stop talking about it, trying to understand what it was or where it came from. After that night, things started to get weird. Doors that I knew were locked would be open in the morning. At night, I would hear whispers coming from the hallway, as if someone was talking softly. But when I looked, there was no one there. Stephen stopped coming over, saying he didn't feel safe at my house anymore, and I couldn't blame him. I didn't know it at the time, but that pale figure in the hallway was just the beginning. Something was awakening in that house, and I would soon discover that the past of the morgue, and that of the serial killer, was much closer than I imagined. After that first appearance, things only got worse. I would wake up with scratches on my back, thin and shallow cuts, as if someone had lightly run a knife over my skin. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's cat, which sometimes came into my room through the window. But the scratches appeared even when the window was closed, and they always formed strange patterns, like letters or symbols I couldn't understand. Stephen, my friend, completely stopped coming over. He said he couldn't sleep right, that he was having nightmares about that pale boy, and felt an evil presence every time he got close to my house. I tried to convince him that everything was fine, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Even my parents started noticing strange things. My mom complained that the cabinet doors were open in the morning, even though she was sure she had closed them the night before. My dad, used to death in his work, started feeling uneasy at home as if he sensed something was wrong. But the worst came one night when I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and dragging, as if someone was pulling themselves along the floor. My heart raced and I lay paralyzed in bed, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. That's when I heard my bedroom door creak open, slowly. I closed my eyes, terrified of what I might see, but I couldn't resist. When I opened them, it was there. A tall, thin, dark figure stood in the corner of the room. I couldn't see its face, only a dark silhouette, but I felt it staring at me. The air turned icy, and I couldn't scream or move. It was only when the figure took a step toward me that I could react. I screamed, and my parents rushed into the room. When they turned on the light, there was no one there, but the fear didn't leave me. The next day, my parents brought in a priest to bless the house. He went through every room, praying and sprinkling holy water, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't something a blessing could drive away. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time, and I could have sworn I heard a voice calling my name. That's when my parents made a decision. My dad found a new job in another town, and they decided it was time for us to move. I was relieved, but at the same time I felt like this thing wouldn't let us go so easily. On the day of the move, as we packed the last of our things, I looked out my bedroom window one last time, and there, at the far end of the yard, under the oldest tree, stood the pale boy. He didn't do anything, just stood there staring at me until I closed the curtains and ran to the car. We moved, and for a while I thought it was all over. But the scratches on my back kept appearing, and sometimes in the middle of the night, I would still hear whispers. I don't know if this thing followed us, or if we left something behind in that house. All I know is that since then, I've never felt truly safe. Even after we moved, that feeling that something was wrong never left me. I still saw the pale boy in my dreams, always standing in the corner of the room, with those dark, hollow eyes staring at me. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, and I could have sworn I heard whispers coming from the hallway. They were low voices, almost inaudible, but I knew they were there. My parents said it was just my imagination, that I was stressed from the move, but I knew it wasn't just that. I started to wonder if this thing, whatever it was, had followed us. Or worse, had we left something behind in that house? Dad didn't talk much about the serial killer after we moved, but I remember one time, when he was drinking a beer in the backyard, he made a comment that got me thinking. He said the morgue had a basement, a place where they kept the most problematic bodies, the ones nobody wanted to see, and he never let me go down there. This whole experience marked me in a way I can't explain. I never felt safe again, even in the new house. Every time it got dark, I was on guard, as if waiting for something to happen. And those scratches on my back, they never stopped appearing. Sometimes I look in the mirror and see the thin cuts, as if someone is trying to send me a message, but I've never been able to decipher it. Over time, I learned to live with it. It's not that I've overcome it, but I've come to understand that some things just don't have an explanation. The past, especially a dark one like that, has a way of haunting the present. And I don't think this thing, whether it's the spirit of the serial killer or something worse, will leave me in peace anytime soon. But I've also learned to face the fear. It's not like in the movies where the hero faces the monster and wins. It's more subtle, more personal. I face the fear every time I wake up in the middle of the night and decide not to turn on the light. Every time I hear a strange noise and take a deep breath instead of panicking. I don't know if I'll ever completely get rid of it, but I know I won't let it control me. Now looking back, I see that this experience changed me. I'm not the same person I was before I saw the pale boy in the hallway. I've learned that the world is full of things we don't understand, and not everything can be explained by logic or science. Sometimes fear is just a way for the past to remind us that it's still there. And maybe, just maybe, the pale boy is still out there somewhere, waiting. But I won't let him haunt me forever. What a horror. Some evil presences can hide inside people, and others inside places that seem normal at first glance. But when the lights go out, the truth comes to light. The following story shows what happens when someone gets trapped in a space where something terrible still lurks. Dude, let me tell you about something that happened to me at the morgue. I've been working there for a few years now, and I've seen it all, you know. Bodies in every possible state, from the most peaceful to those that look like they're ready to get up and chat. But that night was different. It was the first time I seriously thought about quitting and running away. It was a night like any other. The morgue was quiet, that heavy silence you only find in places filled with the dead. I was there doing my usual job, organizing papers, checking the drawers, when suddenly, thud, a dull but clear sound coming from the fridge. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand frozen on the paper I was holding. Thud, again. It was like someone was knocking from inside the drawer. My heart raced, but I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. It's the cold, I told myself. The metal contracting, I don't know. But it happened again, louder this time. Thud. There was no ignoring it now. I looked at the fridge, that row of metal drawers, and saw that the noise was coming from the last one, where the unidentified body from that morning was stored. A guy with no name, no story, just another in the line of who was he. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and went to check. My hand was shaking as I pulled the drawer. The noise stopped. When the drawer opened, the body was there, lying still, motionless. But there was something off. His eyes, they were open. Dude, I swear I had closed those eyes before putting the body away. I always do. It's part of the ritual, you see? But there they were, wide open, staring at the ceiling, glassy, like they were seeing something I couldn't. I tried to convince myself it was just an oversight, that I must have forgotten to close them. But as I went to shut the drawer, I felt it. A presence. Someone or something with me. The air turned icy, colder than usual, and I heard footsteps, slow, dragging steps like someone was walking in the morgue. But there was no one there. I looked everywhere, but the place was empty, just me and the corpses. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. And then, when I looked back at the fridge, the drawer, it was slightly open, just a bit, but enough for me to see the darkness inside. Had I not closed it properly? I could have sworn I did. I approached, my hand trembling, and pulled the drawer. The body was still there, eyes still open, but now it was smiling. I couldn't take it. I slammed the drawer shut and ran. That night, I didn't go back to the morgue, and even today when I pass by there, I feel that chill down my spine, like someone is watching me. Someone who shouldn't be there. I didn't want to go back into that room. Seriously, my instincts were screaming at me to leave and never come back. But I had a job to do and, well, I needed the money. So, after a few days, I went back. The morgue was quiet again, as if nothing had happened, but I knew something was off. That body was still there in that drawer, waiting. When I opened the drawer again, my blood ran cold. The body was no longer lying down. It was sitting up. Sitting, dude. Its head was tilted to the side at an unnatural angle, like its neck had been broken. And those eyes, they were still open, but now they seemed to be staring right at me. I couldn't move. It was like fear had paralyzed me. And then I heard it. A whisper. Faint, almost inaudible, but it was there. It came from the body. It was a raspy, broken voice like it hadn't spoken in years. I couldn't make out what was being said, but each word cut through me like a knife. It was like the air around me was charged with something evil, something that didn't belong to this world. I didn't think twice. My finger found the emergency button on the wall, and I pressed it as hard as I could. The alarm blared, that piercing siren shattering the silence of the morgue. I didn't wait to see what would happen. I turned around and ran. I ran like my life depended on it. And at that moment, I truly believed it did. I never went back to that place. I quit the next day, no explanations. They thought I had lost my mind, and maybe I had. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. A few weeks later, I found out the body had been identified. It was a man, a homeless guy found dead in an alley. Cause of death? Never determined. The report remained inconclusive, and the case was closed. But I know it wasn't natural, not after what I saw. Even today, I wonder if he found peace. If whatever was in that body, whatever it was, finally found rest. Or if it's still there, haunting whoever gets close to that drawer. I don't want to know. All I know is that, since that night, I've never been the same. After that night, nothing was the same. The event left a mark, a scar that won't heal. Even today, I can't enter a dark place without feeling that chill on the back of my neck, like something is watching me. My sense of security, of reality, was shattered. I've always been a skeptic, the kind of person who thinks everything has a logical explanation. But this had no explanation, and it still haunts me today. Facing the fear of the unknown wasn't easy. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was a nightmare, a hallucination from stress. But the memories are so vivid, so clear, that it's impossible to convince myself it was all in my head. I remember every detail. The sound of the knocks in the drawer, the body sitting up, that raspy whisper. It's all etched in my memory like a movie that never ends. Over time, I've learned to live with the unexpected. Not that I've gotten used to it, far from it. But I've accepted that there are things we can't explain, things that are beyond our understanding. And it's made me think a lot about death. We think we know everything about it, that it's just the end, lights out. But what if it's not? What if death is just a door to something we don't understand? This experience showed me that the past can haunt the present in ways we can't even imagine. I never worked in a morgue again. In fact, I avoid even going near one. But that night taught me a lesson I carry to this day. There are mysteries we'll never solve. And maybe that's for the best. Because some things are better left alone. What a horror. What did you think of this story? What rating out of 10 would you give it? Leave your thoughts here in the comments. I'd never seen a morgue so packed. Seriously, it was like one of those disaster movies where everything goes wrong and the bodies start piling up. It was my first day as a forensic investigator, and I was already regretting taking the job. The smell was, well, you know how it is. That mix of cheap disinfectant with something indescribable, something you can only smell. And the worst part, the bodies were literally stacked up. There was no more room on the gurneys, so we had to put them on top of each other, like sacks of potatoes. Except, of course, sacks of potatoes don't have the face of someone who died horribly. Then came the moment to move a guy who must have weighed around 420 pounds. 3 of us tried to push him to make room, but the guy wouldn't budge an inch. It was like he was glued to the gurney, or worse, like he didn't want to move. I swear I felt his hand slip and tap my leg, but when I looked, it was still. I got that chill down my spine, you know. That thing that makes you think, did I really see what I saw? That's when the morgue door burst open. A woman rushed in, desperate, screaming that she had to see her husband. She was so hysterical she could barely form proper sentences. "He's here. I know he's here," she cried, while security guards tried to hold her back. The problem was we had a pile of unidentified bodies. And in the middle of all that chaos, who was going to know who was who? That's when I remembered a detail. One of the bodies we had just received had a nickname tattooed on his arm, JJ. The witness who brought the body said that's how he was known, but the woman didn't say anything about a nickname. She was just screaming her husband's name, which I can't even remember now. But what sent a chill down my spine was when she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "He's not dead. You'll see. He's not dead." And then, my friend, the lights started flickering. That old morgue already had a chronic electricity problem, but at that moment it seemed like something else, something intentional. When the lights came back on, the woman was gone. And JJ's body? Well, it wasn't on the gurney anymore. We found it on the floor like it had fallen, but the gurney was too far away for it to have just slipped. And the worst part? His hand was outstretched like he had tried to grab something, or someone. And you think I should have run away then? Well, me too. But I didn't, because deep down, I needed to know what was going on in that place. And listen, I bitterly regretted that decision. JJ's body. Man, it was in horrible shape. The head trauma was so severe that half of his face was unrecognizable. You could see he had taken a violent blow, something that left no doubt it wasn't an accident. We tried to do everything we could to identify him, but with no papers, no fingerprints, because his hands were, well, complicated, and with that destroyed face it was almost impossible. We only had that nickname, JJ, tattooed on his arm, and that hysterical woman insisting her husband was there. She wouldn't stop screaming, "I have to see him. I have to see him now." The security guards tried to calm her down, but she was uncontrollable, crying, struggling, like her life depended on it. The morgue chief, a tough guy who had seen it all, finally gave the okay for her to see the body. But he was very clear. "Ma'am, I have to warn you, he's in a difficult state to look at." She didn't care. She didn't even wait. As soon as we pulled back the curtain covering the body, she lunged at it. And that's when the chaos started. She threw herself on JJ, hugging him like he was still alive, screaming his name. We tried to pull her back, but she had superhuman strength. And then, it happened. The body slipped off the table. That 420-pound guy fell with a thud that echoed through the entire morgue. And guess what? I was on the wrong side at the wrong time. The body fell on me and I found myself pinned underneath. You know, that weight crushing your chest, making you feel like you'll never be able to breathe again? That was it. I tried to move, but the guy was too big, too heavy. And worse, I was face to face with that destroyed face. His mouth was half open like he was about to say something. And the eyes, they were half open, glassy. But it looked like they were staring right at me. The woman started screaming even louder. "He's alive! I knew it! I knew it!" And then, I swear I felt something. A twitch. Something in JJ's body moved. It could have been my imagination, the desperation, the panic, but I felt it. And then the lights started flickering again. This time faster, like the whole morgue was trying to tell us something. When the lights came back on, the woman was gone again. And JJ's body? It was still on me, but now his mouth was really open, like he was trying to scream. And the eyes, and they were completely open, staring at me. And I swear I heard a voice whisper in my ear, "Get out of here, while you still can." I don't know where I found the strength, but I managed to get out from under him. When I stood up trembling, I looked around. The morgue was empty. There was no one there. Just me, JJ's body, and that heavy silence, which seemed to scream louder than any noise. And then, my friend, I realized something. The tattoo on his arm, the one that said JJ, it had changed. Now it said, "You're next." I was there, under that gigantic body, struggling to breathe. Every second felt like an eternity. The weight of JJ on my chest was unbearable, and the smell, my God, the smell was of death, of something that shouldn't have been there. The woman, the one who had caused all this chaos, was next to me, but she wasn't screaming anymore. She had fainted, falling to the floor with a thud. I tried to cry for help, but my voice wouldn't come out. All I could do was look at JJ's destroyed face, those glassy eyes that seemed to stare at me with a mix of pity and anger. That's when I finally heard footsteps. 3 of my colleagues rushed into the room, and when they saw me pinned under the body, they acted quickly. 1, 2, 3. They pushed JJ back onto the gurney and I could finally breathe. My chest hurt, but the relief of not having that weight on me was indescribable. The woman was taken care of by the emergency team that arrived shortly after. She recovered, but she was never the same. We found out later that JJ's body was really her husband. The head trauma had been caused by a car accident, and he had no papers because everything had burned in the vehicle. But that tattoo, JJ, it was really his, James Johnson, her husband. And me? Well, I earned a nickname that day. Sandwich. Because of course I had been pinned between the body and the woman. At first I hated it, but then I found it funny. Well, until what happened that night. I was finishing my shift late at night when I heard them. Moans. Faint. Almost imperceptible. But they were there. They were coming from the cold room where the bodies were stored. I thought about ignoring them, just leaving and pretending I hadn't heard anything. But something drew me there. Maybe curiosity, or maybe that voice in my ear I had heard before. Get out of here, while you still can. When I opened the cold room door, the icy air hit me like a stab. And there he was, JJ's body, on the gurney. But he wasn't lying down. He was sitting up, and his mouth moved, slowly, like he was trying to form words. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then he spoke. A raspy, guttural voice that didn't sound human. You're next. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think twice. I just ran. And since that day, I've never set foot in that morgue again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear those moans. And worse, I feel his weight on me, like he's still there, crushing me, reminding me that one day, he'll come back. And when he comes back, I won't be able to escape. Thanks for listening to the end. Which story did you like the most, and which one did you like the least? Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps the channel grow, and you won't miss any horror stories.